Welcome. We'll go ahead and start now. We are recording this so that we're around 60 something reviewers. So obviously not everyone can make it. So we'll be able to watch this later on. And those who couldn't make it will be able to see some of the things that we're talking about. Um, we both, Betsy and I, wanted to start off with the big hats off, tip of the hat to all the reviewers. I mean, we had an amazing year this year, actually, the 2023 season, by far more books than we've had before. So it's been really fun because in the past there's been a lot of work sometimes that's been done by a lot fewer people. So that's worked out great. We were on time. We actually finished early, even though we had 117 books. So that was a great big kudos to everyone. We're going to talk about the questions. One of the questions that one of our reviewers asked us was about historical accuracy and fact checking, and a normal reviewing organization. If you go and read a history book, the people that are doing the reviewings have PhDs in histories and/or are experts in the particular area that the book is covering. And obviously, MWSA can't do that. We have a wide variety of expertise. And it's often the case that since we're volunteer, as far as what books do you pick up, a reviewer may pick up a book because, wow, I'm interested in learning about the Battle of Guadalcanal, for an example, and they're not experts, far from it. They're actually trying to learn something for the first time. So one, to state the obvious, we are not expecting anyone to be a subject matter expert. So the question is then, what do we expect as far as fact checking? And my philosophy is that if you read something and a hair goes up on the back of your neck and you say, that doesn't sound right, I thought it was in this year, blah, 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 whatever your question is, that's probably worth a trip to the internet and do a search. And when I answered the question, in fact, I noted that when I went and checked, almost always it's to confirm that the author got it right. But every now and then the author didn't get it right, and we can put it down. So the main answer to the question is, obviously we don't expect anyone to be a subject matter expert. If you are and want to read it, then try to get your volunteer status in there as quickly as you can so that we can give the book to you. And two, just if you notice anything that doesn't seem right, it's probably a good time to just check it out. Let's see. I think that was it. I think we'll move to Betsy to talk about reviewer.
I'm up, and I was going to discuss reviewer comments, and I kind of have to share my screen because I didn't print them out. So let me see if I can find them so that I can share this with everybody. And
can I make a little comment? You're getting your act together there. This isn't really a fact, but I was reading a book and it was like the 1700s, and the kid did not really a curse word, but some sort of something like that, like OMG or whatever he said. And I actually found out that that word wasn't used. So it's, it just, like you said, the hair on the back of your neck, like sometimes something just hits you and you're like, I don't think that's right.
So I can't tell if I'm sharing my screen or not.
Yes, you are.
Okay, because you guys all just got really teeny tiny. So we've kind of harped on this a little bit, and that's what kind of comments are we writing about the books we're reading? And most of you are authors, and so you don't want to have anything torn anew, anything of when you get your comments back. So I wanted to share a couple that we got this year. The guilty parties are not present. Okay. For the first one, and you don't have to read this if you don't want to, but I sure need to. Here's what the author is going to get from this reviewer. The scenes and situations were contrived, some with absurdity, making situations unbelievable. Story was filled with factoids to increase believability. That's a little bit harsh, that whole section right there. And then in the eyes only, the reviewer wrote, the reader has to accept too much contrivance to make the plot work. Well, isn't that a nicer way of saying the whole thing about the absurdity? And then the person wrote, while a lot of trivia is introduced to make scenes more plausible, some factoids are in error. My situation with this is we can write all the nasty grams we want. Just put them in the eyes only, because the eyes only are the only part that the author is not going to get. And in this case, the eyes only said exactly the same thing as the content comments, only it said it nicer. So if anybody's wondering, when I sent that author the books, I reversed those. Here's another one that's, I think, overly harsh. The plot of the story was a rehash. Boy meets girl, they don't get along. They still don't get along or like each other after several meetings. They have to work together toward a common goal. They have an incident that draws them together. Now they become friends and lovers. Well, that's exactly the plot line of many romances and other books. How many plot lines are there? Overall in the whole world of conflict, man versus nature, man versus man, all that. But then the reviewer went on to say, sigh, worn out theme. It's apparent that a man would probably like the story better. It was written from a man's point of view in the first person for men. It reminded me of a cheap dime store novel of old. Nobody wants to get that kind of a comment. That goes beyond harsh and into downright rude. That's not what we want to tell people. It turns out that the reviewer who wrote this, I also reviewed the book and didn't find any problem with the point of view being a man's. It wasn't misogynist or anything like that. So that same reviewer wrote of the style, this was written in the first person, all perception from the main character, and his opinions detract from developing other characters. Well, first of all, it's not really a style issue. It's a content issue. Or a point of view issue, which I guess could be style. The point is, a first person novel is supposed to be written with only the perception, the view, the sight, the taste, the sound of the first person. So to criticize that without offering any, might have been better from third person, or, anyway, I thought the character's fine. But the one that really irritates me is when this reviewer wrote visual. I looked it up, but I don't know the difference between serif and sans serif. That is not a comment that we want to send to the authors, and authors get our comments. So I'm just trying to reiterate, if you have issues with not understanding, put it in the eyes only. If you are so frustrated that the book, you tore out your last hair, put it in the eyes only, and try to come up with something a little bit nicer to tell the author. So we're all on board with that, I believe. So moving on, the other thing I was going to talk about was, and John will go more into this in our next section, but we took a big, long look at all the questions and answers this off season. And you will find especially after John talks, that some things got shifted around. For instance, in the idea of repetition, I wanted to talk about the difference between good repetition and bad repetition. So I would say bad repetition, it just kind of goes boink in your head. This I got right off the internet on the news media. Attendees and students at a high school football game in Alabama last week were left stunned and confused after police officers stunned and detained a high school band director who told his students not to stop playing their instruments. So first of all, that one kind of went boink to me because the proximity is so close. And the second thing is, what they meant was that the officers actually tased the person. They didn't stun him. So using stunned in a different way in the same sentence is still, in my opinion, bad. The next one is Suzanne grinned, her strawberry hair swinging from side to side in a neat ponytail, her bangs framing her wholesome face. One sentence later, we've got her snub nose being dusted with freckles that gave her a look that was wholesome. Again, that's just too much in too close proximity. That's what we mean by that's not good repetition. I'm going to give an example of good because I think Lee Child, who writes the Jack Reacher books, probably is okay with his repetition. He wrote, by 1953, the place was a flagship installation. There was clean brick and shining white paint and a strong perimeter fence. There were flagpoles and sentry boxes and guard shacks. There were mess halls and a medical clinic and a PX. There were barracks and workshops and warehouses. Above all, there were 1,000 acres of flat land, and by 1953, it was covered with American tanks. That there was, it flows. It has a certain rhythm to it. It's not what I'd call the bad kind of repetition. So, and I think the last thing I want to talk about was fragments. And fragments, the use of fragments is a style issue. And every modern author probably that you read does it. And using it sparingly is a nice effect. Using it too much, it gets very tedious reading. So again, with Jack Reacher, this one also has repetition. So he says it was pretty much identical to the one back at Bragg. Same paint, same floor, same furniture, same temperature, same smell, same coffee in the same standard issue machine. That kind of fragment doesn't bother me. It's very obvious that it refers back to the office, the one at Bragg. So as far as fragments go, when they use a really long one that and it's a subject, and then you come to the end and there's a period and you thought that was going to have another verb, and it's confusing enough that you go back to reread it because it's like, well, where did this fit in? Then that's the kind of fragment that would be a technical issue because they didn't construct things correctly. And this is going to be kind of a gray area for us this year as to where you fit, style versus tech, but we'll see how it all works out. One way to use fragments really badly is to use them excessively. And the only reason I'm printing this out from one of the authors who's in our group, not in our group, but who's not a reviewer, excessively, if you look at the page numbers on this, I've got 2 of them on 9, about 6 of them on page 11, 3 more. Then I skipped a few pages and found more on page 14. Then you get to page 25 and you got 5 or 6 of them in page 28. And so that's an excessive number of fragments. And some of them don't make sense. So that's the kind of thing where I would count down in the style that it's an excessive number. I mean, there's 2 on every page at least, and none of them is a sentence, and one of them, here's one that's even confusing. Butterflies rolled around in his stomach, but he wasn't scared, nervous, anxious, angry that his friends were dying. Butterflies rolled around his stomach, but he wasn't scared. And then the next ones were nervous. Did that mean he wasn't nervous? Or instead of being scared, he was nervous? This could have been constructed into a nice sentence that told us exactly what the author was trying to say. So that's all I'm going to say about fragments and their excessive use. And I think I'm heading over to John again, and I'm going to stop sharing. Share. And we're up to new information for the 2024. And John has to unmute himself.
Well, no wonder I was speaking so softly. Electronically speaking. I was going to say, I think you were going to talk about the genre definitions for the year to start off.
You're right. So we've been working a lot in the off season, and thanks to a very special committee of volunteers, of whom 1, 2, 3, some of them are here, Jeanette and Lillian, and Don Brotherton was also there, and that helped us out, and I'm missing a person, Pat Walco. And what we wanted them to do, first of all, was go through our genre definitions and make sure that they say what would actually determine what book goes where. So they worked out our genre definitions, and then from there, we went on to look at the questions and answers that you used to score the 20 questions in your scoring forms. So we want to give a special thanks to all the people that helped on that. Annette, somebody else helped with the poetry too, Nancy Arbuthnot. Is that right, Nancy? And then Sue Rushford has also been doing some stuff, kind of looking through them for a final proofread, which we'll try to get you the stuff before we put it in the form on the next one. Anyway, because we've worked on the genre definitions and we've also worked on all the scoring questions, we just wanted to be very special, giving everybody their thank yous and their appreciation from us. So John will talk more about some of those points, but we also are going to work with a new timeline next year.
As a reminder, the you can find the updated genres that I believe include all the work that our genre working group did. If you go to, in fact, I should probably share my screen here if I can figure it out. Let's see, we'll try. That's not it. I can't find, there it is. All right, everybody's looking at genre and subcategories now. All right, so to find this, it's under, this is, because this is useful for our reviewers and for our authors, we make this one a little bit easier to find. And it is under the main reviews and awards section. You go down to review genres and subcategories. And I just point out that when you click on a different genre, it brings up the definition. So eventually we're going to do a better job of making this available to our reviewers, so you can go in and say, okay, here's what we're saying is the definition for a genre, which is also giving you a clue how to judge as an evaluator, how to judge the content of the book to make sure it's matching what the generally accepted definition is for the genre.
But it's not eventually, because we're going to put the genre definitions at the top of the online scoring form. When you select it, you'll see what it includes.
Right, and also there'll be more details when we're of specific examples and everything. But just wanted to show people that that's where you'll find it. The next thing is the timeline, and frankly, this is to coordinate vacation taking and to make sure that I don't leave Betsy high and dry like I did last year. Sandy and I are going on a cruise, so we're going to be gone for about a month in starting right at the old kickoff date for the submission window. So the new submission window will be run from the 2nd of January through the 1st of June. And that's probably better anyway, because one of the things we always tried to do is to make sure our finalists found out who was an award winner and give them enough time to make their plane reservations and hotel reservations and that sort of thing. So that 2 weeks translates into just sliding everything 2 weeks earlier. So you can expect that as you look at as the season progresses. The next thing we want to talk about is the 100 points. It's a holdover from the spreadsheets that we inherited from 8 years ago now or whatever, that they just happened to add up to 70. And Betsy asked the question, and several reviewers over the years have said, why do you use 70? Why not use 100? That is kind of what we're used to. All those of us that went to school, which hopefully most of us to some school where they graded on that numerical scale. So we changed that, and that led to some changes, obviously, in the medal thresholds, and to reset, because now the top score is 100 instead of 70. Obviously, a gold medal is a different number, a silver, a no medal, et cetera, are different numbers. So we just used a ratio to make the numbers basically the equivalent of what they were before to get the same medal. So that's not important to you in the sense of what the cutoff numbers are, but just to point out that from now on, when you get your scoring sheet back, the numbers of your individual scoring as reviewers will be on that new 100-point scale. As part of that, there's a new, and I've got to figure out how to share a different screen. Let me see, I'm going to stop share and then try this again, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. We've also come up with a new way to do the technical scoring. Is everyone now looking at a table here? Okay, so remember before when we asked you for spelling typos and wrong word, the underneath here, it's 1 was 0 to 1 wrong words, or 0 to 3, I'm sorry. And then we said, but that's for what was the number of pages? 200, a 200-page book. But a 200-page book, depending on the typeface, can have a very different number of words. So this year we're moving to a word count, which we've been asking authors since last year. And now we'll give you a table. So you're not, as a reviewer, you're not having to do the math yourself. You find you're reading a 60,000 or 58,000 word book, and you found 4 errors. You go to the chart and say, well, that's a score number 2. So you can do just look at the chart rather than do the math, which was pretty, depending on your level of understanding of how the page count worked and everything, was a very unscientific way of doing things. So that's one of the changes that you'll see for this year. Another new part to the form is our medal recommendation. And as a reminder, that's the one where before you told us definitely award material, probably award material. We're making it clear that when you do a number 3 now, you're telling us I'm kind of ambivalent. It can be, a high no medal or a low bronze. I kind of can't figure it out for now. But you're letting us know that you're pretty lukewarm on the reading of the book. We've added 2 new numbers. The caveated review required is now the number 6 choice, and not appropriate for the website is your number 7 choice. Another thing to keep in mind is whatever you put here has absolutely no impact on your scoring. The numbers don't, the number that you put in here doesn't add into your score. But this has been pretty helpful for us because, for example, we want you to be able to, your scoring should match what your medal recommendation is. And so, for example, if you said definitely medal worthy, but Betsy and I look at your scoring and it's no medal in tech and a very low medal in many of the other scoring areas, there's a disconnect. Something went wrong, and either our form maybe didn't catch the problems that you saw with it, or like we had happen one time this year, we had a reviewer that actually marked everything backwards, and he put 5s. Thinking that 5 is a higher number, that must be a better score. So he actually marked the whole thing wrong. So it could point out reviewer error, or it could put out, it's good information for you to kind of look at it and consider how your scoring matched up with that medal recommendation. Remember also that before, and I think Betsy's going to talk about this in more detail, but before we used to have a low scoring reviewer conference, and that was the first time we asked you about a caveated review. Now we're expecting you, based on your initial evaluation, to let us know, boy, this had so many errors in it that I think we really need to have a reviewers conference. I wanted to point out, and Betsy and I didn't even talk about this, so this will be new for her, but I'm sure she'll agree that this is a good point because Betsy always supports me. 2 types of caveats. One is, I'm calling it not ready for prime time. And so in this case, we're letting people that go to our websites know that we found errors. And these often it is technical errors that could be fixed if the person knew that a squiggly blue line underneath a word in Microsoft Word probably means you spelled it wrong. And we get a lot of books that way, that we really want to give a warning to people that the book's not ready for prime time. It has plot holes that are all over the place. Again, normally technical. The other kind of warning is, consider it like a warning label. And that is, it can mean that let's say it's not quite to the level where you're willing to say that this book does not belong on our website, but you're saying we had a book that dealt with sexual acts performed on a cadaver or something. It's kind of like, boy, that's really, if it's not appropriate for our website, at least it's worthy of a warning label. And these are the kind of things we can iron out in the reviewer conference, and I'll let Betsy talk about it. But I did want to mention that the caveat can go in 2 different directions, both in terms of the style of the writing the number of errors, and then the other one is just it's kind of like it needs the R rating or whatever to alert people. Let's see. Scoring should match. We talked about that. Forms incorporated expanded remarks and links. Before, when we asked you a question and there was a multifaceted part of the question we're asking you, we put the different things we're asking you in each one of the answers to the question. And that means you've got to read a lot of stuff to go through. So for a lot of the questions now, you'll find, for example, this is the visual number 2, that we're telling you ahead of time, here's what we're kind of looking for. The cover needs to have this, cover content. Here's the kind, we're telling you ahead of time the kind of things we want you to evaluate. And then where we don't want our scoring form to be 20 pages long, sometimes we're going to have a little link like you see here that when you click on it, it'll open up a new window and you can go and find out. And for example, this year, one of the things we'll tell you how to do is how to find the back cover for a book. And this was news for me. I've been doing this for MWSA for many years. And until Betsy and I talked about it, and she explained to me how you find it. And we both kind of learned a lot. I didn't realize that Kindle books almost never show you or include the back cover, for example. And go and look on Amazon, figure this out for yourself. Betsy and I both were like, we can't find one. If you get a Kindle version of a book, you will almost, I mean, pretty much, this is 99.9%. You will get the front cover, but you won't get that back cover. So what we're going to ask you to do is to go to the book on Amazon, and the detail, I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do it, but I'm just going to say that the instructions now are going to be in there for you to find. And so that's a big change for next year. You'll be able to get detailed input to a scoring question via linking to another window that'll open up. And I think we're up to Steamline Reviewer Conference. Betsy, you got to come off of mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, you have to stop sharing so I can share. But I was muted again. So what we've done with the reviewer conference, everybody see that now? Yes. Oh,
Well,
nobody can talk. No. So
I see
what
it,
we-
but it's pretty small.
Okay, let's see. John will have to tell me how to make it bigger. Well, I wasn't going to read through it or do anything with it. I just wanted you to know that when you start a reviewer conference, you're just putting in your name, the book, that stuff is all the same. But when it comes down to whether or not you want to change things, you will be reminded that if you choose to leave your scores unchanged, that you've read everybody else's comments, or you think that they were all wet and so you're keeping your scores the same. But what we've done here is we've made a couple of these things required. You're going to have to fill in and say why you're not changing your scores. Before, it was just like, leave my score unchanged, leave my score. So we've made a few changes to this, but we've abbreviated it and shortened it so that it probably won't take as long and it's a little less confusing. So I think that's all we were going to say about that. And then as far as the genres that we do have that are mostly visual picture things, we've made the executive decision that there are some types of books that we will only accept as a paper. And that's because our scoring isn't going to adequately work with ebooks on the following categories and subcategories. Children's picture book. It's important, if you have a children's picture book, that this is something a child could hold in their hands or you would read with them. There's a physical aspect to it, and you will see better if the font they've selected is easy enough to read and that it fits on the page and things like that. So the children's picture book. We also did decide that poetry books, because many of them are laid out with a specific pattern that won't necessarily be reproduced in an ebook. So poetry books will also be paper only. And then 2 more items, the graphic novel or comic book will also be a paper only. And then a pictorial Coffee Table. Those two probably only ever were paper only, but this is just a change we're going to make for this year. If you want to do a children's book, you have to realize it'll be a paper copy. It'll be mailed to you, snail mail, and same with poetry. So
But-
is that all I had to say, John?
Can I ask? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we have a choice for, other books between ebook and paperback? Okay, still. Okay, good.
Everything except those 4 items. Children
Okay.
picture book, poetry, graphic novel, and coffee table book.
Because I preferred across the board paperback.
Oh, well, that's fine too. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And some people do. I prefer across the board Kindle, but not for those 4 things because you can't adequately assess. So,
Mhm.
and John will tell you that in the next segment about that receiving books at your house.
Ooh.
Over to you.
I was gonna mention something that one, if anyone there in the audience is somewhat skeptical, as I was, about poetry and requiring, because this basically means an author can't submit a book in Kindle a poetry book in the Kindle format. Betsy brought up a book that she looked at, and I thought this was very compelling. And I'm going to probably murder your great explanation, Betsy. But she looked at a book.
Want me to explain it?
It was yeah. Why don't you explain it?
It was one of our authors, and it was probably an anthology, and it probably had a poem in it. And as I'm reading the Kindle, because I forgot to ask for paper, the Kindle at the size font that I was reading it had bizarre spacing. So there'd be 2 words here, and then in a big space, and then a word here that came down on the next line, and then a big space. And I finally thought, they're doing something important. What is it? So I had to shrink my font. With a Kindle, you can choose the size. So I'm shrinking the font. Still a problem. Shrinking. I get all the way to the bottom of the smallest font that you can choose in a Kindle. And what appeared before me was the 2 towers. And it practically gave me goosebumps because with a Kindle book, I had no idea. I mean, it was a 9/11 book. And until you could see that poem laid out the way that the poet had done it, it wasn't even making much sense. So
Anyway, yeah. So I became a believer after that. So that's just giving you more information. And I mean, it's important that you guys know the level of detail that we're looking at in trying to polish things up. And so that ended up being an easy decision once Betsy convinced me that I was wrong. Which I kind of figured out after 45 years with my wife, that I'm always wrong. If I start off with that, then I'm always doing better, I think.
after always fully supporting him, though.
I think the next thing is there's a call for volunteers. And speaking of volunteers, a big thing we always ask for those of you who aren't parked, and I know we were talking about Jeanette moving around a lot. If you're not where you're going to be, make sure in January that a light bulb goes off, and remember that whatever address you gave us last year, if you haven't moved, everything's good. But if you swap between your summer and winter homes and everything and forget to tell us, then we're going to tell authors to ship a book where you're not going to be there in 6 months. And it happens every year. So here's our waving the flag to say, please let us know. And obviously, if you haven't moved, you don't need to tell us in an email, I haven't moved. But if you're going to be in a different place, remember, whatever last address you gave us is the one we're going to ship your paper copy to. So that's an important thing.
John, it happens every year, but not Jeanette. I just wanted everybody to know.
Oh, yeah.
Jeanette
Yeah.
is very good at that. But since we linked her name, just want
Yeah.
you to know she was not a culprit.
That's true. That's true. I was only talking about that she mentioned today that she was moving to
Exactly.
But yeah, Jeanette was not the guilty party in this case. So the next thing is to try out our new scoring forms. And I'm going to try to share my screen really quick as I'm talking here. What we're going to how many do we have now? 3, I think, forms that we have updated. Most of the, if as you go in and check, we've done fiction is done. That's the new scoring sheet. Nonfiction is done. And as you go through at your leisure between now and the 15th of December, if you would like to go through and do a spreadsheet, I mean, a scoring form, just notice the date as you first. So this is the nonfiction. As you get to the first page of the scoring form, this is where it's asking for your email and your name and your reviewer, book reviewer number and all that stuff. That first page, just look at the top. And if there's a date that's older than, November, first part of November of this year, it's probably last year's scoring form. So there's no sense in looking at because you've already seen it. But we invite everyone to please go through and look at them because as we all know, you can have the best editors in the world and then get one person look and say, you missed this. Look at this typo here that everyone else missed. So we're looking for things like typos and does the question and the answers make sense? Can you tell what we're doing and why? And do you have any maybe suggestions on how we might improve things? So that's just a call for all of your eyeballs if you're interested in volunteering. Yes, Betsy?
And what we're asking you to do is actually go into the reviewer's page, act like you're going to score a book, score one from last year if you want that you already had. But because we have 100 points now, and we've used ratios to get there from 70 to 100, and also because we've changed the questions and a couple of them have jumped from, like I said, content to style or something. What we want to do is if you score one that you did last year and let us know which one it was, we can always go back and look and make sure that, yeah, it's probably the score sheet's working. If you do find situations on the score sheet that don't make sense, you see a typo, just use the comments section because we're not asking you to really score a book and get through all the comments you would write. The comment section, just tell us, yeah, these questions are better. No, these questions suck. Don't say that because then we'll never get a committee to do anything again. So use the comments section to actually comment on the form, not a book. And you don't have to do a real book, but you can also numbers. What numbers can they choose, John? Because they're going to have to fill in book dot reviewer number. Or should we send out something to everybody and explain that?
For now, just you can't get to the next page unless you enter a valid number. So let's just say for now, just use books 1 through 10, and then at random pick. So book 1.2 is the reviewer number 2 for book 1 or whatever. So you do have to put a number in, but let's just to keep our job a little bit easier, just use book 1 through 10. And then pick a reviewer number, whichever one you want. It doesn't matter, obviously, because you're going to look at the same pages on the scoring form.
Yep, and you can do as many as you want in the fiction or nonfiction. Each one has like 5 different subcategories. And so the questions, some of our questions have changed dramatically, I say, for the better.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and that reminds me, before we always suggested that reviewers go through and look at a scoring form. Both like in getting ready for January, because it's been a while and you kind of haven't thought about our scoring system. And 2, it's a good idea, especially for our newer reviewers, before you start reading the book, look at the kind of questions that we're going to ask you to answer. And it's better to know that ahead of time before you start reading so that your notes you can go back later and score the book a little bit more easily. And before we asked you to actually go through the scoring form, and we'll have subsequent emails to tell you exactly where to look, but we're going to have the scoring forms translated. And it's basically what our scoring group has been using. And it'll be a PDF that has all of the questions. And so on one page, you can scroll down and look at all 20 questions for each genre ahead of time, and even print out a copy if you wanted to print out one for your own use later on. And that we'll let you know where to look for that later.
And this concludes our program unless people have questions.
I have a couple questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so first is a quick one. Do you ever have the conferences on live in a Zoom?
We've never considered that. because
A
there was no
reviewer?
such Zoom when
Do
we
you mean a
started.
reviewer conference?
Yes, because I
Um,
just think, I mean, I know it's a pain, we're on different time zones and blah, 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 but I think it would be much better if the three of us, the three people, could have a conversation about it.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah,
It's because it's kind of like, how you going to change my mind by
Yeah.
a little check mark?
Yeah.
certainly we can entertain, and I think it is a good idea to make sure we have that as an option. I would just point out that some reviewers over the years almost stopped being reviewers because people got so opinionated about their book. And all of us who've been in book clubs know that when you have disagreements about a book, it can, especially nowadays, it seems like we can go pretty adversarial very quickly. And we've seen that happen a lot when we used to do telephone conference calls for the reviewer conferences. So I'm not telling you that we're not going to do it because of that, but I'm pointing that out as a reason why we can be a little bit careful about it. And for example, if a reviewer says, I'd rather not participate in a Zoom, then that's fine. And I'm sure, Sue, that you would say, okay, we'll do it with the two who want to have it. And if that one reviewer is kind of the problem, that's where, you can offline, you can always email Betsy or me and say, I really think reviewer 3 was way out to lunch, and a reviewer conference would have been a good way.
But not if I'm reviewer 3.
Yes, of course, because we know. But anyway, yes, that's I'm going to write that down. That's a good thing to where we can encourage people in their eyes only comments then or somewhere when they do a scoring form, is that this is a book that I really want to do. I don't think, Sue, frankly, we'll get to the immediately to the point where we automatically always do a Zoom. But definitely where one of the reviewers, one or more especially, say, gosh, I really think that rather than the back and forth that can take 2 weeks based on everyone's schedule, to do it during a Zoom, I think that's really worth considering. So,
But also look at the new questions, and assuming that people have filled out their comments in the first place and they've defended their position, which we're going to be looking at before it ever gets to a reviewer conference. And we'll be letting reviewers know, you really panned this book and you gave me 0 examples of spelling mistakes and you said you found 20. So where are they? But because we're going to try to get people a little bit better on the whole comment section business, we're going to probably see, John, out of 117 books, I don't even know how many of them went into reviewer conference, maybe 40. Do you know?
not off the top of my head. I mean, we go and look, but it's
Somewhere between, I would guess, 30 and 40. And that would be an awful lot of corralling 3 people, finding their schedules, waiting till their schedules meshed, and not getting the book moving while we waited for a Zoom. So I'm just saying there'll be a lot of difficulty in doing it, but that'll be up to John.
I think you also somewhere in the paperwork state that, it doesn't matter if you like or dislike, you are evaluating the book as best you can. And I think, involved in this discussion is removing reviewer ego from the equation, because that's when people get, defensive. It's not really about them. It's not about the reviewer. It's about the book. So
Right. And what I'm thinking about in regards to that, when we say it's not whether you like the book or not, you're allowed to like a book, but that's not the scoring criteria. So, and I think where people get into trouble with that is political thrillers, because we're all so polarized these days. But what I was going to say is we've done our best to be objective in the scoring. There's no way that humans can be completely non-subjective. We're all, we all have our opinions and our backgrounds. And so some of it is subjective, even as to, well, how many fragments is too many? So yeah, we're trying for that. Just don't let your first thought be, I like it, or I don't like it. So
yeah.
I have a logistical question. I'm scoring and I'm on the last section. You know, on the bottom, it says back and forward, back and next. And I don't know why, but I always need to go back to the beginning and I have to stand there and go back and scroll down and go back. Is there not a way where we can jump back to the beginning of that score sheet of that book?
Like go all the way back to content,
Correct.
skipping four different sections.
Right, like I filled them in, or I want to see what did I put in, you know, the content, or I often put the comments after I'm done. I don't usually do it per section.
Oh,
So I'm constantly want to go back, and every time I go back, I have to scroll down to the bottom of that page and hit back and do that for however many pages there are.
okay, and that's a definite John question. He will look into it.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the real problem is, and it's the geeky part of what's happening behind the scenes. You're submitting a Google form when you're finally submitting, and it's going to a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet has to look and know what each one of your answers are. And believe it or not, if I put a go to a choice that says go to back to section 1, that's like adding question number 21. And I got to do the spreadsheets, but I may be able to do that because I like your idea. And ordinarily I'd say, oh yeah, sure, I do that. But the reason I might have to say, well, I may not be able to do it is that very reason. Because I mean, you wouldn't believe some people have seen the spreadsheets, but behind the scenes, it's unbelievable because there's a lot of math and stuff going on to be able to translate those scoring forms. But I like the idea, so it's worth looking into. And I'll try to let you know whether or not it's possible to do that. And for right now, unfortunately, you do have to go back by section because that's the only buttons that Google gives us in their forms.
And you have to scroll all the way to the bottom to do it.
Yeah.
Unless you could put it back up at the top. I don't know.
Again, it's that same thing. It's when I add something, it considers it like I'm adding a question. So, but good point, though. I'd like to be able to try to do that.
It's almost 5 o'clock somewhere. Here. Any more questions?
Yeah, Jeanette had one.
Have anthologies been taken off the table?
No, we have anthologies and collections in the same subgenre. If you went looking for it in our shared folder, when I thought everyone was finished, I moved it out of the shared folder, and that's where we were finishing polishing up, trying to get rid of double spaces and periods, which Sue will tell you we did not do adequately. So do you need to look at one again? Do you need it back?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I was just wondering about anthologies because I thought when our group was meeting that we took anthologies out or something. But I recently read a book written by a Vietnam crew chief, door gunner, scout, left seater, 2 tours, and the stories are just wonderful. So I hope that he will submit that to.
It's still there.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I think one thing we did, because we did make it clear that that you could have more than one author / editor. And so we added some of that verbiage to the definitions to make it clear what we were talking about with the collections / anthologies.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have one more question, if that's okay. So I did book after book, and they were all like so heavy. I had to like cleanse my head with a Maeve Binchy book. So my question is, I know you have a lot of books that you're holding on to. Is it possible for you to release more at once so there's like more of a choice of what kinds of books? Am I explaining it right?
You are. And we were going to evaluate that and see what we want to do for the year coming up, because we know now how many we were able to finish. So we can, as they come in, release them faster. We had a lot of, it was mainly me. I wanted to make sure, because we had those designations of, we're guaranteeing this one, we'll probably get to this, the provisional, and then the waitlisting. And what what we might be considering, and John and I actually have to talk about this, is that everything goes right in until we get to the number where we want to wait list them. So it's possible. We didn't talk about it yet.
But we don't, but just to make it clear, we don't hold back. It's as soon as the author pays their $40 and submits the form, as soon as John and or Betsy has time, we type it in and enter it into the system. So we don't hold back. And so reviewers can pick them up as soon as we put them in normally.
Except I did hold them back last year. We only allowed the first 40 to come out, and those were the guaranteed to be done. And then
Oh,
for the
that's right.
next,
Okay.
for the next 50, I held all of the next 50 back until I absolutely knew that I had reviewers for 1 through 40. That was the holdback last year. But yeah, when it got down to I'm waiting for 2 reviewers to sign up for book 39 and 40, I wasn't releasing them. But now that we know what we're capable of, we'll probably be able to relieve, do that faster. And I was the holdup on that.
Okay.
Guarantee it, I gotta have 3 reviewers on it. If there aren't any more questions, Jim Tritton has to stay behind for detention.
What?
Oh, he has some stuff to share with us. So
Oh, okay.
it's in the chat.
Oh, I haven't even been looking at the chat. So
I did.
Of course you haven't, John. That's why I sent it to Betsy.
So, but we're officially done, I believe, unless anybody has a question.
Well, expectations wise, we're going to do, I don't think we're going to do another one of these before January. Is that correct?
Oh, I think we were, because Pat Walco's gonna do
Okay.
a thing about the genres and stuff, and her compatriots may join in.
Okay. So we'll do one more Zoom probably whenever we get around to it before the window opens again in January.
Well, it could be that first week of January, because even though the window's open, you and I won't have them all up there for people to choose yet. So very shortly after the window opening, it could be that first week of January.
Okay.
I think we put it on the calendar.
And obviously we'll do emails to the whole group so that everybody knows our planning and how things are.
Once we know what we're doing, yeah.
If we ever get to that point.
What happened?
Well,
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so goodbye.
Bye.
I guess I can stop recording now.
Yes.